Hello and good evening to you. Welcome to News 360 and it's live on News Up here at Adesawe in Kanda. My name is Alfred Conte.
And I'm Natalie Ford. Let's get into the headlines for this evening.
News 360 Headlines is brought to you by
Presidential Task Force on ECOWAS Single Currency reaffirms commitments to meet deadline by 2020.
Some boys diagnosed with HIV battling psychosocial effects or swollen breast, the side effects of antiretrovirals.
Also coming up in business this evening, Isoko predicts prices of staple foods to go up.
And on the international front, we get to Nigeria, where at least 50 Nigerian schoolgirls still missing after an attack on a boarding school by Boko Haram.
We've got the details of these stories for you here on News 360, including news from the world of sports and entertainment. As always, this bulletin is streaming live all across the world on 3news.com and TV3 Ghana on Facebook. In our very first story this evening, the Presidential Task Force on the Single Currency Program has reaffirmed commitments to meet the ECOWAS Single Currency Program deadline by 2020. A communique issued after a 4-day meeting in Accra again affirmed members' commitment to ratify and implement all relevant ECOWAS protocols and conventions.
The communique welcomed progress made by member states and encouraged them to continue efforts towards meeting the convergent criteria and strengthening the multilateral surveillance mechanism.
Adopted a revised roadmap for accelerating the creation of the ECOWAS single currency by 2020. Instructed all the stakeholders to implement the revised roadmap.
Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta, answering a question on the implications of the single currency on government policies, said government will be the biggest beneficiary of the program.
We believe Ghana will be in a really good position as a pillar of stability of democracy, the way in which the economy is being managed, and the depth of resources we have. But more importantly, the human capital that we have developed will trump a lot of things.
Let's stay with us a bit further because President Akufo-Addo has encouraged colleague leaders of the West African sub-region to renew their commitment to enhance the acceleration of the creation of the ECOWAS Single Currency Program. At the opening ceremony of the 5th ECOWAS Presidential Task Force meeting in Accra, the President urged them to assent to the revised measures of the program to promote the agenda of regional integration.
The 4-day meeting started with the 6th technical engagement of the Presidential Task Force and the 2nd ministerial meeting. The meetings are expected to, among other things, to provide member countries with a common platform to deliberate on issues related to the ECOWAS Single Currency Program and consider roadmap to accelerate the creation of the Single Currency Program by 2020. President Akufo-Addo challenged leaders of the sub-region to accelerate the implementation of the Single Currency Program to promote effective trade among member states.
I urge ECOWAS member states to renew their commitment to the ratification and implementation of the relevant ECOWAS protocol. Trade, however, cannot thrive in an environment of insecurity. Our efforts must also be directed towards maintaining regional peace and security, democracy and good governance, as well as strengthening the ties of cooperation that exist amongst us.
He said the implementation of the program will also position the sub-region's enterprises to compete effectively in the global space.
Our quest for a single currency is not intended to boost trading of goods produced in third-party countries. It is meant to encourage the production of goods and services within the region. It is thus incumbent on us to strengthen the productive base of our economies and to improve agricultural productivity and industrial production.
President of Niger, Mahamadou Issoufou, encouraged member states to support the call to make the program a reality by year 2020. Heads of state are expected to convene to bring closure to issues agreed on by the various committees of the task force.
Meanwhile, Information Minister Mustafa Hamid has said that members have resolved not to wait for all 15 member countries before implementing the ECO. According to him, not all countries will be ready by the year 2020 when the currency is expected to be in use.
The key convergence criteria needed to achieve the goal of a common ECOWAS currency include strong and unwavering political support and regional integration efforts that require political and economic projects, fiscal discipline, combined with fiscal transparency and a regional independent central bank. According to Information Minister Mustafa Hamid, not all 15 countries will be able to meet the criteria by 2020.
This time there is optimism that it will happen in 2020, mainly because now there's agreements amongst them that by 2020 the countries that have met the convergence criteria would be allowed to start whilst other countries join in. So, for example, if by 2020 we have 5 or 6 countries which have all met the convergence criteria and therefore are willing to start, they would be allowed to start. And then as and when other countries meet the criteria, they also join until we have a harmonious currency for all of the countries.
So is that what we're doing different from the other, from what we were doing initially? We're waiting for everybody to come on board. So is that what we're doing different this time around? Exactly.
Initially, we were thinking that there could be a point in time when all 15 countries would have met the criteria, and then we start, you know, at a go for all countries. But we realized that almost every year, different set of countries meet the criteria, other countries don't meet it. Then by the next year, when you come back to do a review, you realize that those who met the criteria last year, for example, have fallen back behind.
Chairman of the PNC, Bernard Mona, shares similar opinion.
Independence as a continent did not come by all of us achieving independence on the same day. So if we want to have a monetary union, we must start with those countries that are ready. But why do you impose on yourself some rigid conditionalities that makes it impossible for other countries to migrate onto a common currency? Why? Why do you put up certain things you call convergence criteria that makes it impossible for countries to join? Why do you think that all of us must accede to the fact that inflation must be single digit, when indeed others hold the opinion that anytime inflation comes down, unemployment is on the rise? And for them, they should be able to deal with the menace of unemployment than to be dealing with the challenges of inflation.
Meanwhile, National Chairman of the Convention People's Party, Professor Edmond Dele, says the AU should be targeting a national currency for Africa.
Half a loaf is better than none. I would have wished that we had a continental currency. But one point which came very clear is that I think they are determined that by 2020 we should have this West African.
Now to some other stories this evening. Go to the Ashanti region where some boys diagnosed with HIV are battling with the psychosocial effects of swollen breasts, the side effect of antiretroviral drugs. Now, health officials say the condition is irreversible, though can be corrected through a surgical procedure to remove the breast tissue. To weather very disturbing development, but I've been joined in studio by the head of the adolescent clinic at the Komfo Teaching Hospital in Kumasi, Dr. Anthony Enemil. Doc, it's good to have you. Good evening to you.
Yeah, good evening.
Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Now, how widespread is this particular situation amongst these boys where they develop breasts as a result of the admission of antiretrovirals?
Relatively, good evening to your viewers and good evening, Alfred. Relatively, there are very few adults who would have such complications. Out of the over 200 adolescents who are in care at my clinic, we have about 7 of them whom we've documented to have this condition, medically called gynecomastia, which is breast enlargement. So the numbers are not big, but for those who are affected, it is significant for them because it comes with a lot of stigma. Boys who are already fighting HIV, that itself is a level of stigma. But added to that, when their breasts are enlarging, it makes it more complicated.
Is it really just as a result of the use or the admission of the antiretrovirals that causes their breast to enlarge?
The condition is a known side effect of the drugs. It's well documented worldwide. So it doesn't happen to everyone, but there are very few who would have the condition. Unfortunately, even when you take them off the drug, it doesn't reverse unless you do surgery. And because they are men and will not be using their breasts, once we remove the tissues, it will not recur.
I say it will not recur.
No,
even when they return to the admission of the antiretrovirals, because they're going to be on it for life,
yes,
right? So
yes.
if the major cause of this breast enlargement or the enlargement of the tissues of the breast of the man is because of the admission of the antiretrovirals, and I'm just applying common sense.
Yes,
so if they go through surgery, you take it off, and
yes.
they go back to the drugs, what's going to happen?
We don't need to stop the drugs because that is what is giving them life. Without the drugs, they would have died. And the problem is, if we don't correct it, and because of that they stop the drugs, then they are likely to die because their viral loads are going to get high, and they are going to get opportunistic infections. But the tissues, you know, the men do not have big breasts, so all the tissues are removed. So there is nothing for the drugs to act on to get enlarged again.
I see. And what age bracket are we looking at? Those 7 that you have recorded out of the 200 who have developed this particular situation?
They are all in their late adolescence, so ranging from 16 to 19 years.
16 to 19 years.
Yeah.
And so it's the probability of it occurring in adults, it's low.
Yes, I really don't know the incidence in adults because I deal with children and adolescents, but at least I'm talking for those in my clinic, and there are 7 of them who we have documented have the condition, and it is not specific to a particular drug, and they are on combination of 3 drugs, so it's very difficult to tell which of them is giving them the condition, except that we know it's a documented side effect. It's unfortunate 7 of them have, because we have more than probably 90 plus boys in the clinic, but just 7 of them would have the condition.
I see. Because you said early on that this is a double stigma situation, because they're already living with the HIV virus, and then now they're developing a setting, for the lack of better expression, breast enlargement, which is abnormal, right? For a man or a boy to have very enlarged breasts like a woman. What's the cost of this surgery that can correct this situation?
Yeah, currently we are, I'm in discussion with a surgeon who has shown interest in helping them. We are putting together figures to know the cost of, because they will go through anesthesia and all that. So we are currently working on that. Hopefully we'll approach hospital management if they can give support to them. These are children who we have records of how they got the infection. They had it from their mothers when there was no intervention. Some 15 years ago, we didn't have the intervention that will prevent mother-to-child transmission. So we all need to do something to support them. So we are working on that, and hopefully it can be done, and I know they are going to get over that stigma. But for the HIV, it is for life. And the only way they can stay healthy, marry without transmitting and actually infecting their children, is to be on medication. Unfortunately, there are side effects, but we've been managing it since they got to that age.
Okay, well, let's look at the prevalence rate generally and finally of the situation across the country. Yeah,
I mean, generally the numbers are reasonable. I mean, Ghana is one of the low prevalence states in Africa. We are doing about 1.8% compared to South Africa, which is in the 20s. So we are having a total number of, roughly when I checked with National, 20,000 to about 22, 25,000 children, including adolescents, are living with HIV nationwide.
20 to 25,000.
Yes, and that is actually for those we know their status. The difficulty is those walking around who we do not know, and that is even riskier. Riskier in the sense that as we speak, no child or no adult should die of HIV.
Absolutely.
There's medication, and if you're on medication, you live your life, and if there are no other conditions to take you off, you should live your normal life and move on. I mean, it's like somebody with hypertension, diabetes. But the problem is people are not testing, and we are not getting those we need to put them on treatment. The paradigm has changed. Now, HIV shouldn't be stigmatized. You can go to work, you can take your medication, you live your normal life.
But I'm sure you've been involved in the public education a lot more. What exactly still keeps people away from going to voluntarily test that whether you have HIV or not? Because I can say there's a lot of people watching who still would rather prefer not knowing their status than going into an HIV. What is that around that?
I think we all need to work on tradition. I think traditionally, when the disease was discovered in 1986 in Ghana, it was called the disease of death because there was even no medication. And people have gotten used to the fact that when you have HIV, it's a death sentence. When you have HIV, you will transmit it. But HIV has far advanced. There's so much going on. And we all need to, like you are doing. It's a very good effort, and I commend your station for that. HIV is no longer a disease that should be stigmatized. Because, again, as I said, there's medication, and medications are for free. Yes, there are side effects like we are discussing, but then overall, their life expectancy is increasing. I have up to 26-year-old in our clinic who started as a teenager, and he's been on medication, doing well, going about his business. But let's not forget that these children are in our schools. They are everywhere. They are doing very well. But so long as they're on their medication, there is hope. And the good thing is they can marry, and if they're on medication, they're not going to give the disease to their spouses, and their children are not going to be infected. And it is just like somebody with diabetes, with hypertension. Once you take your medication, you will live for long. But everybody must know your status. So
we must all know our status.
I mean, we are coming up with Know Your Status campaign, and eventually, you know, WHO is targeting 90% of population should know their status. 90% should be on medication, and 90% should be suppressed biologically.
Dr. Animel, thank you. I hope that the viewers will have the courage to go and check the status. But before I wrap up, let me just go back to that early story where, just to let you know how the boys who were diagnosed with HIV and battling with psychosocial effects of swollen breasts, the side effects of the use of or the administration of the antiretroviral drugs. Health officials say the condition is irreversible, though it can be corrected through surgical procedure.
The condition known as gynecomastia is a medical condition characterized by the swelling of the breast tissue. It is a frequent side effect of antiretroviral therapy. Health professionals at the Komfo Teaching Hospital say some boys have already reported to the hospital with the condition. Kofi, one of them, feels embarrassed about his swollen breast.
The right side started developing when I was in Form 1. But when getting to Form 3, the left side also started. But that one, the way it came, it was rapidly more than the left side. I used to bath in like a bathhouse which was closed, not the general one. I used to bath there, and that place there was no light there. And I used to wake up early, before even rising bell, so that I can take my bath and hurry up and dress up before I go to class.
A pediatric specialist and head of the Adolescent HIV clinic at the Komfo Teaching Hospital, Dr. Anthony Animel, indicates that gynecomastia is the side effect of the antiretroviral drugs but can be corrected through surgery.
The tissue would have to be removed and surgically switched such that it doesn't show, because we can't take them off the drugs. And if they're on the drugs and they are developing it and it's irreversible, the only way forward is surgery. But till then, I think they have a lot of psychosocial challenges. I mean, a lot of these young boys have gotten to senior high school and they are in boarding schools. So the biggest challenge for them is they can't expose their chest. You know, men in boarding house, the slightest agitation, everybody wants to remove the chest, the shirt and the singlet. But they cannot do that because then it will call for a lot of stigmatization.
It's a real concern there. And Doc, I want to thank you so much for making time to join us. So everybody has to know their status. Know your status. That's the message you're leaving with us. Thank you so much, sir. And you have a good evening. Grateful. Dr. Anthony Animel is the head of the Adolescent HIV Clinic at the Komfo Teaching Hospital, joining us tonight. Now, the Member of Parliament for Akachi South constituency, Bernard Ahiafo, has called for investigations into the allegations that non-law lecturers marked exam papers of law students, which saw some massive failures. He spoke to TV3 in an interview.
81% of prospective lawyers who wrote the exams administered by the Independent Examination Board failed. Of the 474 students who wrote the examination, 206 are to repeat the entire course after failing the final bar exams. Another 177 students have been referred in 1 or 2 papers. It is alleged that persons who are not experts in law marked the exam papers. This MP for Akachi South, Bernard Ahiafo, says the board needs to be changed if indeed the allegation is true.
If it is true that the examination board that is put in place is made up of non-experts in the law, capable of marking a professional law school examination script, then that should be abolished immediately. You can have a body which is not capable of marking a law school examination script to mark it, because once the body is made up of people who are non-experts in the law, I cannot imagine a non-expert in the law marking a law script, even if the marking scheme is put before that particular person.
He also called for investigations into the matter.
That is the way to go, because I have my own doubts as to the allegation is true. So there must be an investigation, and if it is established that the body that is put in place to mark the law school examination is not made up of experts with the capacity to mark a law school examination script, then it should be abolished.
Let's turn to some other stories this evening, as some senior high schools in the Greater Accra region have little or no litter bins at all, forcing them to resort to dug-out pits for their solid waste disposal. The Accra Metro Director of Education, Margaret Frimpong-Corrie, says they have no option because waste companies charge exorbitant fees for collection.
Many schools in the Greater Accra region, particularly the senior high schools, are struggling with managing waste. Some have resorted to the use of dugout pits to manage the situation. On the back of this is the high fees being charged by private waste collectors, with some charges going for as high as 250 Ghana cedis a month. TV3 News visited the Kimbu Senior High Technical School, where the headmistress explained the challenges in managing waste.
I don't think the assembly collect refuse free for us, and actually I didn't come to inherit that, so I'm not aware that the assembly collected.
At the Presbyterian Senior High School, or Usupresec, officials segregate the solid waste to be used later for compost. Hence, the headmistress Barbara Notte said the reason for digging out the pits. At the St. Mary's Senior High School at Kolegono, this huge gutter dividing the school is an eyesore. The gutter has become a collection point for debris from the Kole Lagoon.
You know, all the refuse, they dump them in the grain and it passes through the school. So if that could also be stopped, then we will be free from.
The Accra Metro Director of Education, Margaret Frimpong-Corrie, says the assemblies charge high fees, so the schools have resorted to digging pits so they can dispose of their refuse.
The burning, for example, and the fact that a hole is dug and the refuse is dumped there, we have flies and everything going on it and all that. But it's about the best that we can get at a certain point.
The AMA said it will engage the schools to resolve the problem.
Some of the heads of the schools mentioned some of the challenges that they have, and we've told them there's room for engagement with the companies that are supposed to be collecting in their areas.
Meanwhile, the AMA has distributed some 340 dustbins to senior high schools within the Greater Accra metropolitan area to help in proper segregation of solid waste. 16 public senior high schools and 4 special schools benefited from the distribution.
Let's stay with sanitation. The Youth Employment Agency, YEA, has asked service providers under the sanitation module of the program to reapply. The agency said these providers' contracts have expired and need to be renewed. Early on, where the YEA called for that reapplication by the sanitation module providers. We'll be looking into that. But I still have here on News 360 and it's live all across the world on 3news.com. Also streaming live on TV3 Ghana on Facebook. We'll be back shortly with some more stories to stay. Welcome back to News 360 to our story, where the Youth Employment Agency YA has asked service providers under the sanitation module of the program to reapply. The agency said these providers' contracts have expired and need to be renewed.
The new direction is in line with government commitment to make Accra the cleanest city in Africa. The agency described as unacceptable the amount of money paid to beneficiaries.
The service provider has still, to date, been unable to furnish the agency with the payment records of beneficiaries on their payroll. The review exercise established that each beneficiary is paid 100 cedis, whilst 400 goes to the service provider as management fees. This, again, a practice we consider an affront to beneficiaries on the program.
The agency revealed that most of the beneficiaries working under sanitation module were recruited without recourse to the Youth Employment Agency. According to the agency, Cabinet has directed the Youth Employment Agency to further arrange with sanitation service providers to enter into strategic partnership to improve in sanitary conditions. In a bid to tackle unemployment, the Youth Employment Agency said it has so far created a total of 19,900 jobs for the youth in collaboration with 4 other agencies.
The agency entered into strategic partnership agreements with some public institutions to find innovative ways of creating jobs. These partnerships are tailored to create an estimated number of 50,000 jobs for the youth of this country.
And in some other news this evening, traders at the Mala market in Accra failed to embark on their threat to demonstrate after the expiration of their 3-day ultimatum, citing inability to get police clearance. The traders, however, say they will embark on the protest after getting the go-ahead from the police. Meanwhile, the Bawe Kwate family, customary owners of the disputed land, has confirmed the land belongs to the traders.
Traders went about selling their wares. They failed to carry out their threat to demonstrate.
As for the demonstration, expect it because we have to pass through the legal means. So with the permit, we are working on it. So after it all, we will come out again.
Military personnel detailed to guard the land in contention were still at post, but the traders.
That's the situation. Let's go to Parliament. The Parliament Wednesday witnessed low attendance at the House. The chamber was almost empty at the start of proceedings, and most of them still did not show up even after 1 p.m.
It was 10:50 a.m. when the Speaker walked into the chamber, but only a handful of members of Parliament from both sides of the House were present. And despite the few MPs, the Speaker continued proceedings. After prayers were said and votes and proceedings of the previous days corrected, the Speaker went ahead to call an MP who had filed to make a statement. But that MP was not available. The Speaker proceeded with debate of the President's State of the Nation address. During the debate, the Road Minister Amwakwata indicated as at January 2017, government was owing road contractors 506 million Ghana cedis, whilst total commitment put on government in the sector was 17.8 billion cedis. But his figures were contested by the MP for Adaklu, Kwame Agboja. In his submission, MP for Wa Central, Rashid Pelpu, said criminals and other social deviants in 2017 have been emboldened, yet the President in his address failed to tell Ghanaians the real state of the security situation and how government intends to deal with it.
In some more news this evening, the Vice President has implored the military to deal decisively with criminals who will attack the military embarking on Operation Calm Life at Agogo and other areas across the country. Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia is of the view if the attackers are not properly dealt with, it will undermine the peace of the country.
Dr. Muhammadu Bawumia praised the military for containing the situation at Agogo and other areas across the country. He was, however, worried about the loss of lives.
I believe in the patience and tenacity of the Ghanaian in enduring the sad moments whilst we embark on diverse ways to bring a lasting solution to pertinent problems.
He lauded the military for supporting government to fight illegal miners and nomadic herdsmen. Dr. Bawumia also touched on recent deaths in the security services, citing the late Major Mahama and other police officers in the country. He therefore encouraged the military to tighten their fight against criminals.
To those criminal groups, environmental degraders, and all those activities that pose a security threat to our country, I wish to advise that opportunities exist in the economy for them to channel their energies into more productive and rewarding enterprises that will earn them a decent livelihood.
Dr. Bawumia also pledged government commitment to provide adequate resources for the military. The Minister of Defense, Dominic Nitiwo, assured the Vice President of protecting lands which belong to the military.
I am appreciative, and the Ghana Armed Forces are appreciative of the efforts of the President to purchase 50 welfare buses for the troops and their families, which will arrive in this country very soon.
Chief of Defense Staff Lieutenant General Bedakwa asked government to improve on accommodation for the military officers.
Our commitment, even at the peril of our lives, to ensure peace and security across the country at all times, in conjunction with the police and other security agencies.
Later, some officers who performed gallantly in 2017 during the Chief of Defense Staff essay competition were rewarded.
And rightly said by Alfred, the eco-currency is big on our bill. On Business Tonight, my name is Nanikia. And let's look at what we are talking about. Leaders of 5 West African countries are meeting in Accra to work out modalities for achieving a single currency monetary union, with the introduction of the ECO as a stable legal tender to be used throughout the West African monetary zone. Now, the idea of a single currency for the West African sub-region was first mooted in the year 2000. The 15-member body, the Economic Community of West African States Single Currency Program, is expected to become reality in 2020. This plan to share a single currency was initiated in the year 2000 following an ECOWAS regional meeting in Accra, which resulted in a resolution stipulating the Accra Declaration and the Bamako Accord of the same year. The resolution sought to create a single currency for West Africa. The ECO, the West African Monetary Zone member countries, include the Gambia, Ghana, Guinea, Nigeria and Sierra Leone. The ECOWAS plan to implement a single currency for its 15-member West African states shifted from an initial launch date of January 1, 2015 to 2020 due to what the group called non-fulfillment of financial responsibilities by member countries. The secondary criteria to be achieved by each member country is a stable real exchange rate and a positive real interest rate. Presently, majority of West African countries use the CFA franc as their common currency. Countries like Liberia and Cape Verde have already expressed their reservations about plans for a new common currency. Other relatively smaller ECOWAS member states also do not foresee any significant advantage for themselves with the introduction of the ECO. Member nations need to be aware that if they do not sufficiently grow their economies by boosting manufacturing and the services sector, true regional cooperation and economic integration, including a single currency, are unlikely to become reality. This does not mean just producing and exporting raw materials, but adding value and improving quality and packaging to meet international standards so they can compete globally. Right, so the new deadline, we're talking 2020, and for the ECO to be implemented, there's been 10 convergence criteria set out by the West African Monetary Institute that must first be met, and these criteria, we understand, has been broken into 2, talking about the primary
criteria and the secondary criteria. Now, for the primary criteria, we have 4 to be achieved by each member country, talking about the 5 member countries there. First of all, a single-digit inflation rate at the end of each year must be achieved, a fiscal deficit of no more than 4% of the GDP, also a central bank deficit financing of no more than 10% of the previous year's revenues, and gross external reserves that can give import cover for a minimum of 3 months. And when you look at this, it's quite clear that Ghana in 2011 achieved that primary criteria. They're talking about the single fiscal year there. Now, for the secondary criteria, which comes in 6 breakdowns, prohibition of no domestic default payment and liquidation of existing ones, and tax revenue should be equal to or greater than 20% of the GDP. Also, each member country must have a wage bill to tax revenue equal to or less than 35%, and public investment to tax revenue must be equal to or greater than the 20% there, and there must also be a stable real exchange rate for each member country. And lastly, a positive real interest rate there. So with Ghana being the only country achieving one of the primary criteria in any single fiscal year, it means that these 5 member countries would have to meet both 10 criteria, that is the 4 primary and 6 secondary there by 2020 before the ECO comes to play. So let's see what happens for member countries. But away from issues of ECO, ISOCO, an information and communication service for agricultural markets in Africa, has predicted prices of staple foods will go up. Now, speaking to TV2's Norm Falong in Accra, content manager at ISOCO, Francis Dansoeje, said Ghanaians should expect an increase in the next few months. According to ISOCO, there would be a shortage in supply of staple food crops that will result in market price increases due to the armyworm infestation mid-2017, which ravaged farmland across the country and caused huge losses to farmers. Content manager at ISOCO, Francis Dansoeje, said despite efforts by the Ministry of Agriculture to control the extent of damage caused by armyworms, the losses were still higher than anticipated. He explained the increase in prices will be as a result of supply falling short of demand.
Last year, we had them attacking majority of the maize fields that were in BA, and then some parts of Ashanti, and then the eastern region, causing a lot of havoc. In some fields, those who cultivated the major season, that is between April, May, June, and then they harvesting August, some had a total crop loss.
Traders say prices would be determined by the farmers and other market forces.
5 cedis. Last year, they 4 cedis.
A bowl of maize is 5 cedis. It was 4 cedis last year. It depends on the farmers. If our produce is not ready and we have to buy from Burkina, prices will increase.
ISOCO expects governments to be alert. On to banking now, GCB Bank has inaugurated its brand ambassadorship initiative dubbed Golden Eagle Ambassadors. The program is to ensure total customer satisfaction and effective representation of the GCB brand at all stakeholder contact points.
GCB Bank has its brand positioning program aimed at becoming Ghana's most welcoming bank, offering accessible financial support wherever it is needed through helpful service and expert solutions. Currently, the bank has entered another phase of its growth trajectory with acquisition of 2 indigenous banks to create Ghana's largest bank. It plans to ensure that its brand values are integrated across the entire network and reinforced at existing branches to ensure consistency and credibility. As a result of this, the bank has developed the Golden Eagle Ambassador concept with the aim of identifying brand champions at the branch level to drive the assimilation of the bank's brand values amongst its staff.
As an embodiment of GCB,
Our ambassador should project the image of the bank. For those onboarding the GCB brand from ex-UT and Capital banks, making a strong first impression with colleague employees and customers goes a long way in building our brand.
Chief Business Development and Marketing Officer Hannah Essien underscored the role the Golden Ambassador will play in the bank.
The inauguration of the Golden Eagle Ambassadors today should mark the beginning of change. A change that will yield excellent results, that will propel the bank into its set objectives to become the leading bank in all our markets.
We need for us to be consistent in the kind of service we give. So we are using all these outlets, which have given us over 200 staff, that we can drive the message we have. We can drive quality customer service. We can show a different face of GCB.
The Golden Eagle Ambassadors are expected to be an embodiment of the bank's identity in appearance, demeanor, values, and ethics, strengthening the customer-product service relationship.
Right, and you can visit 3news.com for more. My name is Nanikia Mensah. There's more on News 360. Stay with us.
Going to the international front this evening, I beg your pardon, where earlier in the afternoon, the Florida shooting and the schools that led to some agitations in the United States, and a demand by the victims for the president to come in to take action against the issues relating to the gun control in the United States, giving statistics of persons who have suffered as a result of the lack of clear stance by government. Let's go for some entertainment news.
Entertainment news is brought to you by
In entertainment this evening, we're doing something lifestyle related. Now, in this story, we ask you, do you know lifestyle hardly gets time, sleep or exercise to eat well? Do you hardly get time, sleep or exercise to eat well? Well, most celebrities find themselves in that bracket, mostly due to their busy schedules. Here's a report on the schedules of celebrities.
Working extremely hard has become the order of the day, as most people are convinced it is a sure way of achieving success in life. It is common to find career men and women prioritize their work, living an unbalanced lifestyle in the process. Eating well, exercising and having a sound sleep is often not prioritized, exposing them to avoidable health complications. Here are some tips for those who find themselves in that bracket.
I always say that we make time to service our cars. So what time are we making to service our human beings? That is the exercise. Exercise is the way that you get rid of all the stress, the toxins in the body. And that's why when you exercise, you always look younger and fresher. And so you have to make the time. And then in terms of the diet, it's very important that you eat well, don't eat too late, don't eat too oily foods. All the kelewele and the pizzas and the fries, they must be reduced, especially if you are one that is sedentary, who is doing more sitting. Because the more oil foods you eat, then you are piling up a lot of calories inside the body, which will not be necessary, a lot of trans fat. So it's about making smart choices on a regular basis.
Founder of Fat to Fit, Akoto de Gross, thinks having a proper health routine and eating plan is key to staying fit.
Your body is sacred and you must take care of it.
The wellness officer proposed the use of the staircase rather than the lift, which is in vogue now.
So for very, very busy professional celebrities who are using the excuse of lack of time or busyness not to make time to exercise, it's rather unfortunate. I know that all of us are busy. Many of us don't have time. We are always on the go. But you have to prioritize and plan to do something. It may not be that 1 hour at the gym. It can be, 30 minutes. It can be walking even faster. If you've noticed, Ghanaians walk very slowly. It's quite unfortunate. We walk leisurely. So it can be walking faster. It can be things like using the staircase when you go into a building instead of using the lift. So these are small things that you can do to, make sure that you are keeping healthy. Your heart is working well, your body is functioning well. Because trust me, if you don't do these things, like you said, the repercussions would come back later.
Well, I want to say thank you for spending your 60 minutes with us here on News 360. Remember, we're premiering The Desperate Housewives Africa tonight. My name is Alfred Akansi.
And I'm Natalie Fort. We've got more news on our website, 3news.com. News at 10 will simulcast on our sister station, 3FM 92.7. Thanks for watching. Have a lovely evening.